What's up out there, guys? Funk with you, and I am reviewing a book that I have been contemplating on, procrastinating on for basically my entire life. I have finally gotten around to reading The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. The reason I've been putting this one off is because I felt that the book might feel dated. I felt that it might feel boring. It might be a slow read. I couldn't have been more wrong. I was totally caught up in this thing from the very first page. There's trouble in this thing as soon as it starts, and the pressure begins to build from there, and Tolkien utilizes a kind of short chapter setup in this. In the chapters, there are many breaks where you can pause, where you can take a break, and I felt that that short chapter style setup really helped with the pacing of this book. Tolkien was deeply imaginative and inventive, and I felt lost in wonder while I was reading this. It was a truly enchanting read, and I felt the vividness in the descriptions. I felt like I was there with the hobbits, darting from place to place, carrying the ring. I felt the power of the ring, and as though I were a member of the Fellowship, epic fantasy readers have sometimes described this series as overtly descriptive and lacking in action, and I do not relate to that view. I felt that it moved along very well, and that at no point did I feel as though I were pushing to get through it. I was completely satisfied with the pacing, and I can only hope that The Two Towers and The Return of the King are this good. Now, I must tell you all that I have not seen the movies, so I really don't know what is going to happen here. I assume that Frodo will be successful in the end after a long, hard-fought journey, but the fact that I'm in the dark, I'm certain, is contributing to how much I'm enjoying this and the fact that it's a very suspenseful read for me. This one is a tale of good versus evil on an epic scale. Frodo Baggins inherits a magic ring from his uncle Bilbo. Little does he know what he's been put into. The ring was created by an ancient evil dark lord named Sauron, and Frodo now has had this responsibility fall on him where he has to try to prevent the Dark Lord from regaining the ring. You see, Sauron wants to take over Middle-earth for the worst, and it's up to Frodo and the Fellowship to take that ring from the Shire and take it to Mordor, where they can throw it in the cracks in the mountain there, down into the volcanic-like sea of fire to destroy it and prevent it from being used for evil. The problem is that Sauron is in Mordor, so they have to go right into the heart of evil to try to accomplish their task. And in a nutshell, that's what this one's about. I like the way that Tolkien works some humor into this thing. Not only is it very serious in a way, but the spirit and the wit of the hobbits are literary gold, and I laughed aloud many times as I read through this thing. For example, Bilbo Baggins, the hobbit who has possession of the ring when the novel starts up, he has some relatives that are generally disliked by the rest of the Hobbit community, the Sackville Bagginses, and I loved their pompous attitudes. It really gives a funny aspect to the story. Another example is the clumsiness of Sam Gamgee. Sam is Frodo's best friend, who will apparently follow him even unto death. And I loved the fact that he was a very loyal person, totally committed to the cause of getting rid of that ring, of destroying the ring. But he also has this kind of ridiculous element to his nature that I felt worked very well. If an author can take you down a vivid, epic road and philosophize about many of the most serious things in life through allegory and character relationships, and get you to laugh while you're on your way, that's an ace in my book. The story opens up in the Shire, and I immediately felt the allure that has captivated readers for decades. I felt absolutely at home and completely comfortable with the hobbits and their environment. And I loved the descriptions of the beautiful, wonderful Shire. It has a fairy tale kind of element and feel to it that absorbed my mind truly. Now, I'm fairly new to fantasy, guys. I have completed Stephen King's epic The Dark Tower series, and I've read some pieces and parts of other series, and I have picked up on some things that have certainly inspired other authors and pieces of literature. For example, there's something in the Fellowship of the Ring that immediately took my mind to The Eye of the World, the first book in Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series. There's a scene early on in The Eye of the World where our characters are traversing a pathway through a deep, dark forest. The characters hear horses galloping up from behind them. It's the enemy on dark horses, dark riders with big black hoods that cover their heads. And I realized that that scene was inspired by the Fellowship of the Ring. I also picked up on things from Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, Terry Brooks's The Shannara series, and Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files. As a person who's experienced my fair share of loneliness in this world, I really appreciate this book. You can feel like you've really befriended the characters here, and you can feel like you've inherited yourself the problem with the ring. Frodo has a monumental task to carry out, and he has a formidable foe to attempt to topple, and anyone would be blessed with even one friend the likes that Frodo has in this story. When someone is willing to take on your conundrum, to put themselves in your camp, and try to work through your life problems at risk to themselves, you know that you have a valuable and virtuous friendship. I will say that I get an epic fantasy kind of feel from this. I wasn't sure initially if I would, because when we say epic fantasy, when I say it, I'm usually thinking of a series that's at least 4 or 5 books long, usually more than that, right? The Dark Tower series is an example of a shorter epic, and if we look at something like The Wheel of Time, now that's an epic series. And when you're reading an epic, the author has so much time to author the characters and work on the relationships and factor so many different places and time periods into the narrative that you get this feeling of broadness. You have background and scope and depth, and it makes for a really wonderful journey. That's the great thing about reading an epic, is that it's a long tale with so much going on. And I can see some of that in the Fellowship of the Ring. Of course, this is the predecessor for so many epic fantasy series. I can see many more characters coming into play before this thing is over. I can see many plot twists and surprises coming in. And the story does have some of that large, epic nature. I very much so appreciated the fact that the characters who have magic in this book aren't overpowering. It can be very common in fantasy for a character to work their way out of any situation by just pulling the magic wand out and poof, problem solved. For example, Gandalf is a powerful wizard, yet his real power comes from his experience and his wisdom and his understanding about life, and that helped to make this book for me. When characters have to figure out how they're going to deal with their problems and work through them without relying on magic every time they're in a bind, it gives the tale an element of plausibility, and I felt that plausibility was definitely present in this volume. I did not expect to be surprised while I was reading this, but Tolkien does a great job throwing twists and turns in. I didn't know where I was going to go next, and I was really satisfied by what he did with this one, and I'm quite thrilled about the ratings of these things on Goodreads. The first installment, The Fellowship of the Ring, gets a 4.36, which is a very good rating on Goodreads. However, The Two Towers gets a 4.44, and the last part, The Return of the King, rates a 4.53. These are astronomical Goodreads ratings, and it seems as though the average reader feels like the story keeps getting better and better as it goes along. Before I finish up here, guys, I want to name my 3 favorite characters. I liked Bilbo because of his upbeat nature and the fact that he was a very wise, well-traveled person, and because of the fact that people love him and trust him. I just got a good vibe from Bilbo. I also liked Sam Gamgee because of his fierce loyalty to Frodo, and I loved Tom Bombadil because of his joyous, wonderful, jolly nature. Bombadil actually made me happy when I was reading his tale. He sings all the time. He has no need for normal speech. Why talk when you can sing a song? He has a very mysterious nature as well. Apparently, he's been around for a long time. And this is no spoiler, friends. I don't know what's going on with him, and I don't know if he'll show up in the story again, but I really hope that he does. I give The Fellowship of the Ring a 5-star review. It's a perfect review from me. I give it a maximum recommendation, and I think that people who normally wouldn't read fantasy could very well fall into this and enjoy it. And I think that if you are tentative about reading this, if you're hesitant like I was, that you should definitely commit. Themes like light versus dark, magic, friendship, and obsession make for one heck of a read, and I can't wait to read the next part of this story, The Two Towers. Well, there you have it, guys. The Fellowship of the Ring. I give it a fierce recommendation, and you'll be seeing the Frodo Funko Pop up here on my shelf soon. Let me know in the comments, guys, if you have read this thing, or if otherwise you have a book recommendation for me. Thanks for dropping by. I'll see you next time.